is an international jurist, educator and foremost judge. He served as President of the Australian Conciliation and Arbitration Commission, Chairman of the Australian Law Reform Commission, where many Australians got to know him, Judge of the Federal Court of Australia, President of the New South Wales Court of Appeal, President of the Court of Appeal of the Solomon Islands, and Justice of the High Court of Australia. Since then, he has undertaken many international activities for the United Nations, the Commonwealth Secretariat, the OECD, and the Global Fund Against AIDS, Tuberculosis and Malaria. He's also worked in civil society, being elected President of the International Commission of Jurists. He's heavily engaged presently in international arbitrations, domestic mediations, and teaching law. He is Honorary Professor of 12 Australian and overseas universities. In 1990, he was awarded the Australian Human Rights Medal. In 1998, he was named laureate of the UNESCO Prize for Human Rights Education. In 2010, he was named co-winner of the Gruber Justice Prize. In 2011, he received the inaugural Australian Privacy Medal. The honorary degrees of Doctor of Letters, Doctor of Laws, and Doctor of the University has been conferred on him by several universities in Australia and overseas. Ladies and gentlemen, it's our honour to have with us today Mr. Justice Kirby. It's a particular honour that he will be delivering the Neville Bonner Oration. Mr. Justice Kirby was well known to Neville Bonner and was one of that small group of people who started ACM. One further matter before I finalise my long introduction. Outside you will find on the table the Charter of ACM. You may have noticed it. It was offered to you. The Charter of ACM is a superb document. It's as good as it was then, today, and it is very much a broad church. It brings together all manner of people who, for some reason or other, would support the Crown in the Australian constitutional system. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honourable Michael Kirby.
Thank you very much, David Flint, for that overlong introduction. I actually rushed to the microphone in the hope that this might circumvent the introduction altogether, but David was in full flight before I got to speak. I agree that the Charter of ACM is a very good document, and indeed I remember exactly the circumstances in which it was drafted, because it was drafted by me, and it was when I was President of the Court of Appeal of New South Wales. The case was extremely tedious, and I therefore took up my pen and thought, I'll dash this thing off, and so I did. And like so many things that you do very quickly, it was brilliant, and it still is brilliant. And I commend it to you all, because it had the germ of the idea that secured the success of those who joined ACM and who were opposed to a change in our constitutional arrangements, because it laid the greatest emphasis on inclusion of people of every background, of every religion, of every ethnic community, of different sexualities, from all parts of Australia, big electorates and small electorates, all states, and inclusion was the key to the success of ACM in combating the Republican referendum, which happened, as you've no doubt been told, exactly 20 years ago this day. So we meet on a historical day of reflection. I want to start by acknowledging the Indigenous people of our country, the many wrongs that have been done to them, including in the law, and our need to correct those wrongs. And I think governments of different political persuasions have been trying to do that, but there's still a long way to go. Neville Bonner was born in 1922. He was actually born on an island in the middle of the mouth of the Tweed River, and he was not the recipient of formal education, but he became a ringbarker and other odd jobs, and he went up to Queensland. He established a political party called One People League, and subsequently in 1967 he joined the Liberal Party, and in August 1971 he was appointed to the Australian Senate as a result of a vote in the Queensland Parliament following the retirement of Dame Annabel Rankin. Some of you who are a bit older, and I see that there are quite a few who are a little bit older, will remember Dame Annabel Rankin, a very distinguished senator. Anyway, he was appointed in 71, he was elected in his own right in 73. In those turbulent years, he was re-elected in 72, 74, 75, and in 1980, but he was opposed and he fell out of favour in the Liberal Party, probably because he kept crossing the floor to vote against the government in the federal parliament, something the Labor Party detests and the Liberal Party doesn't like any much more, and therefore he lost his pre-selection and he stood as an independent, and he was only narrowly defeated on re-election to the federal Senate. He was never a minister, he was a rebel Liberal, but he was a person who was respected across party lines. He joined the council of Griffith University, and he was honoured with an honorary degree by that university, and he was honoured in the Order of Australia in 1984 as an officer. And so it's a good thing that we remember him on this occasion, remember his contributions to our Parliament, and he became a voice in our Parliament, but it was difficult for him to get his voice heard, and that is something which is relevant to the issues that are now before us concerning the Uluru Statement and giving a voice to Indigenous people in our federal Parliament that is effective. Something that Minister Ken Wyatt talked about on the 30th of October in an excellent speech in which he also paid tribute to Neville Bonner as the first person who had a voice as an Aboriginal Australian in our federal Parliament. And Minister Wyatt commended the efforts of Professor Marcia Langton and Professor Tom Calmer, both of them very distinguished Australian Aboriginals, who are to be given the obligation of the co-design of the voice into federal Parliament requested by the Uluru Statement. Now, I took no actual part in the referendum in 1999, because by that stage I was a Justice of the High Court of Australia, and so I was sworn to completely desist having anything to do with the federal constitution and its change. But the efforts that were organised by ACM were ultimately successful, and the national vote on the referendum was 45% to change and 51% against, 55% against change. So there was a good slice between the proponents of change and the opponents. And it's very important as one looks into the future and what may happen on this issue in times to come, to remember the breakdown of the votes in the several states, because under Section 128 it's necessary to have both a majority in the votes of all the people of Australia, but also this curious provision which we adopted from the Swiss, which requires that there should also be a majority in a majority of the states. And that means you have to win 4 of the 6 states. And though territories may now vote, they don't count on that extra requirement, the double majority requirement, which only relates to the states. So listen to the percentage votes in the different states. I'll simplify it just to give you an idea. New South Wales, 46 for change, 53 against. Victoria, 49% for change, 50 against. Queensland, 37% for change, 62% against. Western Australia, 41% for change, 58% against. South Australia, 43% for change, 56% against. Tasmania, 40% for change and 59% against. Northern Territory, 48% for change, 51% against. Only the ACT voted for change, 63% to 36%. So it was a big vote in the ACT, virtually 2/3 vote, but in every other state the vote was against change, and in Queensland especially, but also in Western Australia and in Tasmania, very big votes against change. And as those who hadn't noticed these considerations in the recent federal election in May of this year have now come to understand what happens in Queensland matters in our Commonwealth, and there is a need to make a very big change in Queensland from the situation 20 years ago for things to go better for the Republican cause. The interesting feature of the vote was that the biggest votes for change happened in the 2 major cities of Australia, Sydney and Melbourne, but Adelaide voted strongly against change, Brisbane voted even more strongly against change, the Gold Coast, which is a city in itself, voted strongly against change, and Perth voted strongly against change. And actually, if, as happened at the time, the newspapers published a map of Australia showing where people voted for a republic and where people voted against, the portion of Australia which voted against was shown in this map rather in the American fashion, red if you voted for the constitutional monarchy, and it covered virtually all of Australia, and the votes for change happened, I'm afraid to say, very strongly in Liberal Party electorates, more than in Labor Party electorates. I was quite pleased to see how many Labor Party electorates had voted strongly against any change in our constitutional arrangements. And it would be a good thing if some of our ambassadors for ACM were to do a study of the breakdown in the voting in the referendum of 1999 to analyse how people voted, because it is a very telling statistic that although the Labor Party has committed itself to a Republican change as a party, their members voted very strongly just 20 years ago against it. J.B. Chifley, the great post-war Prime Minister of Australia of the Labor Party, said that the constitutional monarchy was a handy constitutional fiction. And Prime Minister Gillard, in that interval where she was the Prime Minister of Australia in 2010, said that the issue would not be revisited during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. Mr Abbott likewise indicated that there would be no interest in having the matter revisited, and I'm sure this morning in his recorded interview he would have said much the same thing. Bill Shorten, however, urged that there was a need to breathe life into this issue, and as you remember in the May 2019 election, he suggested that there should be a plebiscite held so that people would be asked to vote on the principle of a republic without turning their minds to the irksome question of what form of republic they were voting for. And that is the kind of mischief which was visited on the people of the United Kingdom in the vote on the Brexit. It's exactly what happened in the United Kingdom. It is having a plebiscite disconnected from the power of the organ that has the power to change things. And in that case, it led to an almost insolvable problem which has bedeviled the United Kingdom for many years, and it would be, in my view, a very unfortunate step if we took that course in Australia. Because one of the problems is, as has been found in the United Kingdom, that it can be disrespectful to the position of outriders in the nation. In the United Kingdom, as you know, the people of Scotland and the people of Northern Ireland and a very large proportion of the people of Wales voted to remain in the European Union. It was nationalist English people who voted in very large numbers, and as a consequence of that divided vote, there are now real questions as to whether the union of the United Kingdom will survive. So we should learn from that mistake, and in Australia we should stick to our institutions for changing our constitution, and that means votes in federal parliament and then a vote for the double majority required by the people. Now, a monarchy is not, I think, a natural system of government attractive to many people. If the monarchy that was proposed was a monarchy like that of the Sultan of Borneo or the King of Saudi Arabia, it's not a monarchy that I would like to be a member of. I think you have to be very clear about the type of monarchy that you're talking about, and ours in Australia is a very peculiar type of monarchy. It's the product of centuries of constitutional history, and we have to be careful in turning our backs on it. It served us well as a political system. It avoids the risks of the very many unattractive republics that exist in this world. It does tend to temper politics by having a head who serves long-term values. And if you actually ask yourself, where is a place beyond our shores where, though I would never leave Australia, never turn my back on Australia, but where is a place which you might be able to put up with? Well, normally I think Australians would come up with Canada, New Zealand, the Netherlands, Scandinavia, and the UK much of the time, though not always. And if you analyse it, the reason for the success of those countries is that there's something strange in the water, that they have a system of government which is temperate and is representing all of the people through the unelected head. It mixes the elected and unelected, and that's not an unusual thing in a democracy. It's important to remember that in our constitution we are not an elected democracy in every branch of the constitution. We don't elect the judges. We don't elect the bureaucrats. We don't elect the military. The system is a mixed system of elected and unelected components. And the fact that the head of state is not elected is not destructive of the democratic nature of the entire package. As well as that, we have to think of who would be the president under whatever model, yet unknown, was chosen if Australia became a republic. And the great likelihood is that it would be a politician. I say that because of the fact that repeated polls have shown that you cannot get up a system which involves an appointed president, somebody elected by the Houses of Parliament, or one of them. The people of Australia don't want it, and therefore those who want to change the Constitution have to face up to a system which would involve the election of no head of state or the appointment of a head of state who was elected by the whole of the people. And if you have the whole of the people voting, then the likelihood is that you would have members of parliament. And as one commentator said recently in an English journal, I can't really warm to the idea of having somebody like John Major or Tony Blair waving from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. And I think we would probably feel much the same thing about that. Politicians have their place, but it's a place in Parliament and for a very short period of time normally. And that is, I think, how most Australians will want to keep it. Now, before I finish, I want to come back to the point that I made when I began. If I look at the composition of this order of proceedings today, I don't think it can be said that the order of proceedings really carries forward the model of ACM as it was established in the 1990s and which proved so durable and successful. I am pleased to honour our parliamentary host, the Honourable Fred Nile, and Mr Nile and I have had recent correspondence on a matter in which we fiercely agreed, which was a matter relating to the better defence of privacy in this state, in which he voted very wisely, I thought, in the Legislative Council. But one would not call Mr Nile a person who would ever be in danger of being regarded as a stooge, representative or even fellow traveller, an expression that is not now much in vogue, of the Australian Labor Party or of people of the left, nor the Honourable John Howard, who took part in the next session about the winning campaign, nor the Honourable Tony Abbott, nor Peter King, who served in the federal parliament as a member for the Liberal Party, nor the much respected former minister Nick Minchin, nor the Honourable David Elliott. And when I see the material of ACM, I have to say, with great respect, it breaks my heart that there are not more people from different backgrounds. Now, I do realise the efforts that have been made by those in charge of the current fortunes of ACM to attract people from the Labor Party or from a generally liberal, small L liberal background. And I realise that that is not always easy by reason of a sort of self-denying ordinance of the Labor Party itself, because if a matter is adopted in the federal platform of the party and a person is a member of the party goes public in opposition to that platform, then they run the risk that they will, by their own actions, disqualify themselves from any political aspirations they have in the Labor Party and perhaps endanger their membership. All of that is understood, and I know the heroic and I would say even saintly efforts of David Flint to make sure that he could attract people for the Labor Party, because I learned recently, and it was a very shocking piece of news to me, David, that you had begun your incipient political career by actually joining the Labor Party, something which I had never seen. I think you kept that very deeply under wraps, and no one knew about that ever, was never mentioned in dispatches. But though it is very difficult, we made efforts, and we did have people who were members of the Labor Party or ex-members of the Labor Party who'd retired from political ambitions. They didn't care what the damage to their glorious political careers were going to be, because they'd finished their political careers. Or people who were not members of any political party but would have been seen as people of a liberal, small L liberal, philosophical bent. And the plain fact of the matter is, if you look at our program today, and if you look at the activities of ACM in recent years, it does have a look about it of being the Liberal Party old boys. Now, I don't mean in saying that to be insulting or hurtful to my host today, who've done me the honour of inviting me to come into the People's House. I'm saying this for your own good, and I'm saying it for the good of the constitutional system, which has merits above party politics, far above party politics. And unless something can be done to deal with this, I am greatly afeared that if there were another run of a Republican push, especially if it were done in the process of plebiscite plus republic, then we would not have the success that we had in 1999, and it's my duty to say that very bluntly to this audience. I say it often when I go to other audiences, and I see audiences which no longer reflect our current country. I go to audiences and there are virtually no Asian Australians present, no Indian Australians present. When I go to my old school, Fort Street High School, when I was at that school back in the 1950s, the school comprised 700 boys and there were 9 Asian Australians. And one of them was John Yu, later Professor of Paediatrics, later Chancellor of the University of New South Wales, later still, like Neville Bonner, elected Australian of the Year. A very great man. And when I go to the school now, 50% of the school are Asian Australians. This is the face of Australia today. It's not the face of this audience, and it's not the face of most audiences of people who are interested in public affairs. And if the issue of republic or not non-republic is to be debated again in the future, then that has to be done with people who come from every walk of life in our country, because that is the great strength of Australia now, and it's our opportunity. And even if you don't agree with that, it's the reality of Australia in this day and age. So, I say respect to all of those who continued to carry the flag and continued to fight the good fight. But it's got to reflect the principle of inclusion. And if it doesn't, that will be fatal to the defence and protection of a system which is objectively a very good system of government, a very good system of government indeed, and one which I think should be defended, but defended in a very intelligent way. So I honour Senator Bonner. I honour those who struggled in the referendum of 1999. It was a beautiful moment when that referendum was decided, and we are entitled to a little hubris and joy about that moment. But the joy passes, and those who say that that won't happen again, that there will not be a vote for a republic, they are fooling themselves, and that things can happen very quickly, as Brexit has shown. And so quickly has Brexit developed that it really threatens the integrity of the United Kingdom. And if that can happen in a country like the United Kingdom, of hundreds of years, and threaten the departure of Scotland and of Northern Ireland, when the Queen would become just the Queen of England again, then it can happen here, and it can happen very quickly. And I personally don't agree with condemning people who support the Republican cause. Of course there are rational arguments for the Republican cause. Of course there are sensible Australians who support a Republican cause. Emotionally, I am a Republican supporter, but rationally, I'm not. And therefore we can honour those who are a different opinion to ourselves, and we can uphold the values of the system we've got. And that is what I came to say in honour of Senator Neville Bonner.
In thanking Michael Kirby, I should say once again how much we appreciate his role at the inception of Australia as a constitutional monarchy. And it was his role to make Australia as a constitutional monarchy, along with others, such as the former Lord Mayor of Sydney, Doug Sutherland, who unfortunately can't be here today, to make ACM a broad church. And I fully agree with that, and it is very true. We did very well in the Labor electorates, and we did poorly in the inner city Liberal electorates, mainly because the Labor voters in the inner city electorates, such as the one in which I live, are not your traditional Labor voters. They take a different intellectual approach to Labor. But speaking myself as a Oration, which was very rare and unfashionable when I was a boy, I must say that I am probably the most, apart from that, I'm probably the most normal person in the room, because I fulfill that old saying that nobody under 30 who is not a socialist has a heart, and everybody over 30 who is still a socialist has a brain. I was at, I must say, Michael Kirby has sprung on you the story that, the correct story that I was a member of the Labor Party, but not only was a member of the Labor Party at the university, I was a member of the Labor Club, so persuaded by Paddy McGuinness, whom you may remember, and persuaded by him to join it. It was being run by Stalinists, to join it so we could walk out and form the ALP Club, of which I then became a member. In my political affiliations, I was the president of a branch of the Labor Party, and I was a delegate to the Labor Council. And the extraordinary thing I found was that when I was appointed by your government, Senator Minchin, when I was appointed to your government, they didn't check on this. They didn't ask me anything about this. And they appointed me to be chairman of the Broadcasting Authority without knowing anything about my past. And at that time, I was not a member of any party. I joined the Liberal Party later, and principally because I saw it as the best guarantee of the constitutional monarchy. And this is the situation that I find. I have tried very hard. It is harder now to get people of a Labour persuasion to come out to support the constitutional monarchy, including the retired politicians. I've spoken to a large number, I won't name them here because it would embarrass them. The best I can get, and I got it from a serving minister, was this: if you're in real trouble, then I will come out. If the not me, but if the constitutional monarchy, because I'm often in real trouble, as you could see today, Judge. But the point is, they say, this is a general view, because of the way in which the parties, not only the Labour Party, the principal parties have become so rigid, it is very difficult to go against whatever is the received position of the party. The Liberal Party doesn't have a caucus rule, but they might as well in some regards. Now, the best I can get from people is this, that if we are really in trouble, if the constitutional monarchy is really in trouble, and I had this from a state minister, not at this state, but another state, they would come out to help us. But even with retired people, it's very difficult to get them to come out. They will tell you privately, oh yes, I think this is all rot, but to get them to come out is very difficult. Also, on the subject of Senator Bonner, I agree with you entirely. What a magnificent man. I met him in Canberra at the Constitutional Convention, and he really was a gem. And his speech at the Constitutional Convention was the only one which attracted a standing ovation. Of all the speeches there, a really wonderful man and a great contributor, and it was interesting to be reminded of why he didn't get pre-selection. He didn't get pre-selection because he did what members of the party were supposed to be able to do, make up their decisions and vote according to their conscience.